Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, court appointed in private, marriage and relationship coaching using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French or English and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found on lifecoachddanmzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for 8th episode of season 25, a very special guest, Mr. Neil Markey, sharing his journey with severe PTSD and depression and how psychedelics and holistic approach helped him heal. So just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves as no one can do a better job. Neil, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dr. Dan. Yeah, I can give a quick intro. I usually start my story in undergrad. I was at University of Maryland studying math, and September 11th happened. You could actually see the smoke from the Pentagon at the top of the football stadium. And long story short, I joined the officer training program pretty soon after that, thinking I was doing the right thing, and ended up in the service. I went to Iraq once as an officer, and then I went to Afghanistan twice with a small special operations unit called the Ranger Regiment. And I was a lucky one. I was an officer and was a bit more removed from the worst of it, but it still left some real marks. And I got out in 2012 and went to graduate school at Columbia University. And so by some measures was doing quite well professionally, but I was really struggling. I was isolating. I was using alcohol too much. And I had been cycling through different Western approaches like SSRIs and anti-anxiety medications and sleeping pills, and just like wasn't making much progress. And then I got introduced to meditation and met this guy who ended up taking me under his wing and taking me on some of my first long form programs. And then through that network, I had some professionally facilitated psychedelic experiences, and those were transformational for me and kind of put me on this whole new path, which is had lots of twists and turns from 2012 till now. But maybe I'll pause there. That's kind of how I got into this work.
Well, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here all the way from Jamaica, uh, Neil, and thank you for sharing your experience. So, as you know, when it comes to happiness journey, this is primarily a very subjective experience. Everyone has a different definition of happiness. And so tell me how, after the service, and I know that you dealt with PTSD, you dealt with anxiety, depression, so on and so forth. Is the person that brought you in under his wing, is he the one who taught you about the benefit of psychedelics, or did you experience it before and then you kind of just went in to study the topic?
No, I got introduced to meditation first,
Okay.
and then it was different individuals that allowed me to have the psychedelic experience. But I think psychedelics and meditation are actually very closely related. I think that they're quite complementary. And if you look at a lot of the traditional use in different indigenous communities, there's a lot of mindfulness practice and intentionality around the experiences. And so for me, those psychedelic experiences I've had 10, 12 years ago, it almost felt like they were accelerating what I was trying to do with meditation. That was like very clear to me. And so I'm a big believer in, if we're going to give people these experiences, we should be teaching some of these practices. I think it's really, really important.
So when it comes to, so explain to me the difference, even though you said that there's a very close correlation between meditation and usage of psychedelics. So does psychedelics expedite you getting into a trance or into the like into the kind of hypnosis, health hypnosis, or what exactly is the cycle when someone uses psychedelic versus someone who do meditation?
Yeah, I think it depends on the dose with psychedelics. So you can take a really mild dose. There's a lot of interest in this idea of microdosing, where you're taking an actual sub-perceptible dose. Um, I think that can be helpful in helping people get more in their body and helping turn off that chatter that many of us have, right? And many of us have this chatter, and it's influencing us all day. And it's hard to kind of create some space with it. Psychedelics seem to, in my opinion, be able to help it there. Sorry, I had to click you froze for a second. And in the large doses, like what we do, the mechanism of action isn't quite well understood. But what we can see from an fMRI brain scan, if you give people these high doses, is it allows parts of the brain to reconnect and to have better connection than they might have previously. So there's some theory that when we have traumatic experiences, parts of the brain will kind of like lose function or shut down. And it looks like the psychedelics, the psilocybin, might allow those brain connections to open back up. And that's probably happening all throughout the central nervous system potentially too. So it helps get the brain body back to a more regulated base state where it functions better and can kind of heal better.
Mm-hmm. So would you assume, Neil, that using psychedelic is a quick fix to those who are impatient to go through meditation?
Is a quick fix for meditation?
No, is it
I
a quick fix to reduce the symptoms of PTSD and
well,
depression, anxiety?
look, so you know, psychedelics are not without risk. So I think it's important that people are aware of that. But and they're not for everyone. We can talk more about people they're probably not appropriate for. But if used in the right way, yes, for people that have pretty severe indications, it looks like a properly facilitated psychedelic experience can bring a tremendous amount of relief. Now, we would argue that there's benefit in that, but really what we need to do is you need to get people to change their habits and their ways of thinking, and that actually takes effort. So there can be value in just the mystical experience of a psychedelic experience, but I think what we've seen and is pretty well agreed upon is that you can give people these experiences and they may have a window after that experience where they actually feel a lot better, and that's great. They'll report that they feel less stressed, they feel more connected, they feel more empathetic, all these positive improvements. But if the person doesn't make any habit changes or lifestyle changes, behavior changes, you're going to go back to your old ways. There's just so much momentum there. There's so much history there. So we're really big on trying to introduce people to these basic well-being practices like meditation and time in nature and gratitude practice, because that's what's really going to sustain the benefit. But yeah, many people report pretty, very significant positive change. Not everyone, but many do.
And so you said it could have adverse side effects. So if you could tell our listeners, Neil, what can someone experience or expect as a side effect to psychedelics? Because obviously there's pros and cons in every type of medication or even, homeopathic medication. But if you could just give us like a rundown.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the important thing is there's risks to everything, right? Like people die each year from taking aspirin, and so
Yeah.
it's relative risk. But I think it's important for people to be wide-eyed and aware of the potential so they can make an adult decision.
Correct.
I think there's a risk of us overemphasizing the benefits and underemphasizing the risks. That's not good for anybody either. So it's just like there's a decision to be made for each individual. The risks, for like if you just take mushrooms, for instance, they're non-toxic. It looks like they're neuroregenerative. There's very few contraindications. So, they're actually generally quite safe for the body. It's not like you're going to overdose from them. Now, where people get themselves in trouble is they take too big of a dose in the wrong situation, and then they have the experience and it scares the heck out of them. It can be traumatic if you're in the wrong place with the wrong people, because your entire world can shift. And so it's really important to get what they would call the set and the setting right, and be in a safe place. And this is what we try and take a lot of care to do right. So I think you can dramatically mitigate the potential of a traumatic experience, right? If you do it in a controlled environment with good facilitators, you get the dose right, you do all the right things. Now, with that said, many people, 30%, 40%, will have what we call challenging experiences. The difference between a challenging experience and a traumatic experience is, I would say, a month later, if you ask someone if they would do it again, the traumatic experience group would say, no, it wasn't worth it. I'm in a worse place. And like I said, I think you can very significantly mitigate that. Many people will have a challenging experience where things during the trip come up. They have these memories for days after. They can be that some of these traumas and things can be more at the surface. You're more aware of them, but through that you can develop a different relationship with them, right? So you can work through them with proper support, and then these memories aren't holding you back as much. And so those people had a challenging experience, but a month later would say it was worth it. I'm glad I did it, right? And so that's actually quite common. And then there's some other potential side effects. There's a phenomena called HHPD, which is essentially sometime after someone's had the trip, could be months, they'll have the experience again in some way, not like a full experience, but they'll notice it comes back. And this is a very small percentage. It's like less than 1%. And what's interesting is the majority of people that have that experience actually appreciate it. They like it. They're like, it reminded me of how beautiful the previous experience was. It didn't cause any issues. So I had this a little bit of a flashback, but it wasn't bad. But a small subset of the small subset say, I didn't like that, right? And so those are real risks. But again, I think if you do the comparison to many other of the risky activities that we as humans do on a regular basis, or compare it to many of the other drugs that we might get from a doctor, to me personally, the risk versus potential benefit calculation is quite clear that this is not a wild thing to do. You know, it's actually, if you do it in a safe, controlled environment, it's much safer, in my opinion, than going out to a bar on a Friday night with a bunch of friends.
That's a good point. But
Yeah.
it's something that the two side effects, the two possible side effects, which is one traumatic and the other one can be challenging. But the traumatic one, isn't it counterintuitive that it's supposed to be able to help you with PTSD, which is a traumatic experience, but yet it brings back a traumatic experience in itself? So that
Well, it can, yeah.
so it just reinforces the existing trauma that you have, trying to cure it with mushroom, but it just exacerbates the existing trauma.
Yeah, and can create a new trauma. I mean, those it's a big experience, you know, like people that haven't had these before, you've never done anything like it. So your whole world is going to shift. And that can be really disturbing and scary if you're not doing it in an environment that's conducive for that, with people that know how to manage. And, you know, that's why we're really big on our structured approach. We communicate all of this to our guests. We teach them kind of how to manage these experiences. We surround them with facilitators that have been doing this work for years, if not decades. And so, you know, you're in a controlled environment, and then within that controlled environment, I think it's quite safe. But I mean, it's a bit the wild, wild west right now. I mean, you can buy these 5 milligram mushroom chocolates off the internet, and if you took that in the wrong environment, I mean, good luck. You know, it's going to be a ride.
Very right, yes. Now, in the challenging, I would say, outcome, is it the best time where you could have a behavioral therapists that could actually bring out past trauma or past issue that can be put into the surface or brought to the surface and discuss about how you can fix it? Because the challenging one appears to me that the individual who go through this experience will be able to remember clearly
Yes.
what their trauma was about, and then the behavioral therapist can actually address it.
Yes. And so Rick Doblin, who's the executive director of MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies that was bringing MDMA through clinical trials, you know, said it's called psychedelic assisted therapy for a reason. It's not just the psychedelic experience. It's the psychedelic experience brings these things to the surface in some way, from, you know, into our rational mind, but also in the body. And then trained clinicians can help the person work through that to develop a different relationship with it. And so the work on the front end around the experience and that follow-up, in our opinion, is really critical. If if nothing else, you're definitely leaving something on the table. You're not optimizing it. And so, we're big proponents on the behavioral health, side of the equation. It's really important.
So would you say that the challenging outcome of using psychedelic can also be opening the door to the subconscious mind?
That's what it looks like. I mean, people report different things, but and we don't understand the brain and subconscious super well. We just don't, right? But that's certainly what looks like is happening, is that some things that have gotten buried away because that's a coping mechanism are opened up and then brought to the surface. And so for a period of time afterwards, there can be some challenge there because they were tucked away quite nicely, but they were seeping up through the subconscious into our relationships and behaviors, they just weren't as clear. And so now when they're at the surface, there's this opportunity to actually change them, right? And develop a different way of perceiving them,
Okay.
experiencing them.
And how much of the experience would people remember, Neil? I mean, is it because sometimes memories that happen right before you awakened, sometimes they could be reburied into the subconscious mind and completely forgotten? And some people say, I don't remember my dream, but yet I remember some bits and pieces. So how much of all that can be clearly remembered after the effects of the psychedelic dissipates?
Yeah, everyone's different, and it's even in the same individual can have different psychedelic experiences and report different things. So it's kind of hard to say, but after the experience, you're conscious the whole time. So you're there, you live this experience, and after that, you're going to be able to recount quite a large amount of it. And there's different schools of thought. Some people encourage folks to, after the experience, like write things down, like, and put it on paper so that you have that memory of it. Because over time, for sure, some of it'll fade just like a dream.
Mm.
Now, there's some schools of thought that you don't want to hold on so tight to it. You don't need to force anything. You just, through this experience, you're allowing things to come to the surface, and what needs to happen and shift will happen and shift as it should. I don't know if I have a strong opinion on one way or the other, if one's right or wrong. But for sure, these things are coming up.
I see. And when it comes to the FDA, and I know that the FDA has not really yet approved psychedelic treatment for certain mental health condition on the DSM-5. So do people just have to go at their own risk and basically deal with certain provider of psychedelic treatment to be able to decide if this is the best course of action for them? Or would um, doctors or pharmacists refer psychedelic treatment for specific PTSD treatment?
Yeah, this is there's a couple sides to this answer. So in the United States right now, doctors can prescribe a form of ketamine, which is a type of psychedelic, through a nasal spray called Spravato. And that's been around for a while. And from the data, it looks like there's some positive benefit for some clinical indications, treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, things like this. Doctors in the United States can also write off-label prescriptions for IM ketamine or IV ketamine. And many of the doctors like to do this because they feel with the REMS, what they're able to do with Spravato, they can't get to a dose that's actually high enough to get the benefit that they want. So there's some doctors out there that feel comfortable, because ketamine is actually quite safe in these, it's actually very safe in these ranges, doing it off label for with their clients and using IM or IV. So those are available in the United States now. Now, obviously, you can get reimbursement for something that's covered. None of the off-label stuff is going to be covered by insurance, because that's just the way that the systems works. And then if someone wants to do psilocybin mushrooms or a synthesized version of psilocybin, the only way in the United States fully legally right now is to do it as part of a clinical trial. That if you do it as part of a clinical trial, then that clinical trial has authorization from the federal government to use those compounds to do medical research. there's been state level changes in Oregon, and it's coming in Colorado for mushrooms, to say that doctors can prescribe mushrooms at the state level for different indications. But what is a little bit challenging right now is it's still very clearly federally illegal. Mushrooms are still a class 1 substance. So do I think there's a huge legal risk to an individual if they went to Oregon and had a doctor write them a script? No, but you should probably check your work policies. And if you have a security clearance, you need to be super, super careful, because you are still breaking federal law. It's super clear. There's no misinterpretation of that.
So you could be arrested if you carry a mushroom?
Yes, federally. Yes, absolutely you can.
Okay.
Now, would they? I
Prosecute.
don't think it's a priority for them right now. I think the risk is low. Is it zero? Of course not. It's not. It's very clearly illegal. Now, why we've decided to work in Jamaica and the Netherlands is because it is actually fully legal here, so long as, this is where it is going to get a little complicated, we're not making medical claims. So we don't diagnose or treat any conditions. And our programs are explicitly non-medical. And we actually, if someone comes to us with treatment-resistant depression, we unfortunately right now have to say, hey, can we refer you to a ketamine clinic in the United States, or a place that might be able to give you a similar experience? Our programs are more for personal, professional, spiritual development for people that are doing okay, because we're doing them in a group setting. Now, everyone has their stuff, of course, because we're human, but we're not doing any medical treatments. Our programs are for people that are generally well and want to become more empathetic, more creative, develop some of these well-being practices. Our programs are more for professional development, if you will, if that makes sense. I know that was a long-winded answer, sorry, but it's a complicated one.
Well, look, it's important that we give to our listeners all the tools that they need to be able to make the right decision, because like I said, we do not want to mislead them in any shape or form.
Exactly.
The importance of this podcast is for them to be able to make a sound decision.
Exactly.
Right treatment for them, and if not, they should go to the doctor, get the ketamine treatment, and then decide that, because this seems to be approved by the FDA, and be able to go from there. But like I said, it's something that it's really interesting in terms of like the science of psychedelics, and especially the type of treatment that can actually help them. But some people are closed-minded. They have to do some more research, decide exactly if this is the best course of treatment that they can get. And of course, they have to leave the country to get to that treatment. So that again, you have to take all this into consideration. So when it comes to
Right.
a treatment, or like in your practice, or I would say in your retreat that you have in Jamaica, so how much is something like that would cost the person to be able to attend?
Yeah, and maybe I can give you a little overview of the program first, so your listeners can understand. But we do a digital prep, an immersive experience, and a digital follow-up, because like I was saying earlier, we think it's really important to kind of think about this from an integrative health, behavioral health perspective. And really what we're looking for is habit change. And so if someone books one of our program, they get access to our catalog of content, and they kind of can go on a learning journey. So there's modules on meditation, there's modules on breath work. If you want to learn more about the research, you can learn more about the research. And so we're trying to teach people the mechanics of what's happening when you have these experiences, and get them to develop some new skills. And then all of our programs are done in a cohort model. So our groups are usually around 15 guests. And we get the group together a couple times before the program so they can meet each other, they can meet the facilitators, because we know from adult learning and habit change science, there's actually something quite significant in that group dynamic. So we try and get that started early, so when people are on site, we can get kind of right to it. And then we bring people to Jamaica, the Netherlands. We have beautiful properties. I'm on one now that are away from everything, so it's a bit of a digital detox. And while we're on site, we're doing a lot of those experiences that we taught in the prep, but now we're doing them together in nature, in community. So morning meditation, nature walks, breathwork exercises, Western psychotherapy informed group work. And then the highlight is the 2 psilocybin sessions. And so that's on day 2 and day 4. And we use all naturally grown mushrooms. They're tested at the growers. We test them chemically and personally by the facilitators. And every guest gets their own custom amount, which is within a predefined range, but it's a discussion between them and the senior facilitators. A lot of times, if there's some anxiety, which is normal, you go a little lower in that first one, and then the group dynamic gels, the trust between the facilitators gels, people feel really comfortable in that second session. You can go to a bit of a higher dose is a lot of times how it plays out.
Is it based on someone's weight, Neil?
No, they've actually they did a pretty robust study in the last 18 months that kind of debunked the whole correlation to weight. So it actually has no impact.
Okay.
You would think it would, but it doesn't seem. So it's more of a, how is this person presenting? What's their state of being? You know, some guests come down and they're they have a long history of this, or they have no fear in the world and they just want to get to it. And that guest can go a bit higher. Many more of our guests, it's their first time. And so you just want to give them an experience that's like a little bit less intense so they can learn how to steer and become familiar with it. That's kind of more of the determination there. And then, you know, it's a beautiful property. So it's got access to a private beach and a river. And so we're in nature a lot. And it's just like it's a beautiful experience. And then when everyone leaves on day 6, then there's a 6-week digital integration period where you get continued access to the app and the practical exercises. We bring the group back together a couple times. And this is where we're really trying to take advantage of this window of neuroplasticity where people are in this more malleable or open state. Where we're saying, you know, really commit to doing the meditations, really commit to making some habit change, because if you do in this window, it looks like those benefits are more likely to extend.
Where can people?
And so it's a by room. What's that?
Yeah, where can people sign up for your retreat?
It's just beckleyretreats.com.
Okay.
And if you Google Beckley Retreats, will come up. We're part of the Beckley ecosystem of companies, and including the Beckley Foundation, which has been one of the world's leading research nonprofits for this work. So we've got a great program and great teams.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, Neil, that is all the time that we have today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible talent in psychedelics. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. And I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled. Season 25 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories, just like the one that you listened today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Psychedelics, when used responsibly in therapeutic settings, offer a profound pathway to healing PTSD and depression by addressing root causes rather than masking symptoms. They help rewire the brain, fostering emotional release, self-awareness, and a renewal sense of purpose. Combined with a holistic approach, such as mindfulness, therapy, and physical wellness, this method empowers individuals to reconnect with their inner strength and resilience. Now, rather than simply treating the pain, this journey promotes growth, allowing people to confront trauma with clarity and compassion. Many have found these experiences to be transformative, sparking a deep understanding of themselves and the world around them. Now, with the right guidance, the process becomes not just a recovery, but rediscovering joy and freedom. Healing is possible, and the path forward is brighter than ever. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.